Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. The Haunt of Love and Lies. Episode 16. Chapter 143. Sheila's point of view. My eyes widened as I backed further away from him and his piercing stare. The golden gaze in his eyes sent a disturbing and cold chill down my spine. "You?" I whispered breathlessly, as he kept watching me. He smirked wickedly and his image transformed. Killian's hair changed into a long golden one that fell in place behind his ears, slipping down to his shoulders, and his face changed as well. A small gasp escaped my lungs as I was staring face to face with the man that had always crept into my thoughts. And for the first time in a long while, I felt fear. He was the stranger on the dance floor. He had somehow spelled himself to change his appearance. And now that the spell was broken, he no longer smelled like a pure-blooded wolf. He pulled away from the table, taking slow calculated steps to where I remained rooted, and stopped when he was a breath away. His towering height leaned closer, allowing me to gaze properly into his eyes. The scent of rosewood invaded my nostrils and I could hear Adie's gasp within the corner walls of my mind. "Mate." Her voice was stiff and laced with both shock and confusion. Similar shock and confusion found my blue irises as her words finally registered within me. "No. No. It can't be. Killian was my mate. He was my fated mate." His wicked smirk deepened as if reading every thought of mine. "Adie, what's going on?" I asked mentally, panicking. Adie was completely silent for a second. "I don't know, Sheila," she confessed weakly, obviously still not recovered from the shock yet. My blue eyes flashed on him as he lifted his hand to touch me, but before he could, I backed away, but his hands gripped my wrist and I felt it. The sparks that were eager to align, shot through my body. I gasped, and before I could recover from whatever this was, I was slammed against the wall, and his body pinned hard against me so that every piece of him could feel me. "Finally, we meet, little wolf," he spoke in a deep accented voice, having his thumb trail down the outline of my jawline. "Get off me!" I screamed, and his hands grabbed my waist, digging me deeper into his body so that our noses could touch. "I am here to claim what's mine. And you are coming with me," he spoke, his eyes regarding my lips. "No," I whispered, and everything from my dream came rushing in. No, this couldn't be happening. I lifted my hands, bringing my magic to the surface. I attempted to use my magic on him, but it didn't work. He gripped my hands, binding them together with his behind my back. "You should know, magic doesn't work on my darling." I tried connecting to Killian, but I couldn't. Suddenly, fear crept in. "Killian," I muttered carelessly, and his icy golden eyes hardened, but his smirk remained. "Ah, that peasant wolf won't make it to dawn, and the same goes for everyone with the unfortunate fate of being here tonight." His lips moved freely against each other and his words made my eyes round as I wrestled against him in an attempt to free myself from his firm hold. I couldn't use magic on him, so I forced Adie out, sharpening my claws. I attacked him, and he took a step back, not out of fear, but his gaze held a sick interest and fascination in everything I did. I had no idea what was going on, but nothing changed the fact that he had been after my life since the second I was born, and he was responsible for the death of my parents. And right now, I had to get away from him. I used my magic and lifted a barrier between us as I raced to the door. I had to find Killian, and warn the pack of what was about to happen. I jerked the door open, racing out. Suddenly pausing, I sent a glance his way and he remained calmly rooted where I left him, his hands clasped behind his back and gleaming eyes watching me. He could come after me but just didn't want to. That alone sent a shiver to my bones as I fought against whatever confusion his gaze attempted to create within me. I had to find my mate, Killian. Killian's point of view, I headed back to the castle, after looking for Sheila where I had left her with her brother, Kaiser. She wasn't there, and so was Kaiser. I had tried mind-linking her, but it wasn't connecting. I didn't know why, but Riker had a strange feeling in his chest but I tried to fight it off. I'm guessing it was due to everything that I was feeling from Sheila all morning. She had been worried, even worse, frightened about something. So, I invited Kai to come to see her, and thankfully, he did. I could only imagine how hard it must be for her. Not being able to see her family whenever she wanted to. The council was still searching for Sheila, and so was the Dark Circle. Even though all the council wants is to keep her safe as well, I agreed with Leonardo, the council couldn't be completely trusted. I took a deep breath, fighting off Riker's growing discomfort. It was affecting me as I felt fear starting to creep in every second I searched for Sheila and couldn't find her. It was odd I couldn't connect to her, not through the link nor our bond. That was worrisome. I ran my fingers through my hair, moving faster to the grand hall where everyone was having fun, and getting the most out of the night. I glanced through the crowd, searching for my mate. I couldn't find her. But I found Brielle and Alan in a corner. They seemed to be in a serious conversation. Well, Brielle was doing more of the talking while Alan looked like he would burst from so much elation at any second. I hated to intrude, but this was urgent. Brielle, have you seen Sheila? I went to them, gaining their attention. She shook her head, while Alan's eyes scanned around. She hasn't been here since you both left. Alan's eyes moved from the crowd to me, and I blinked confusingly. What do you mean? I asked. Sheila left with you a few minutes ago, I heard Morgan's voice from behind. He walked closer to us, his deep green eyes heavily on my face which showed confusion. What are you all saying? I had left Sheila outside with Kaiser and when I came back to fetch her, she wasn't there, I explained, ignoring whatever was going on with Riker. Brother, we saw her a few minutes ago. She returned from outside and was searching for you. And you came to us, and left with her. Morgan placed the silver cup in his hand. Where did you leave her? I didn't, because I haven't seen her, nor any of you from minutes ago. It's impossible I had left with her. I had begun to lose all the control I had as the terrible feeling in my chest grew more. That's not me, whoever Sheila had left with wasn't me. Oh, goddess! Sheila is in danger. If it wasn't you from a few minutes ago with Sheila, then who was that? Alan muttered. Something's wrong with her. I can't connect with her. We need to find her. I left the hall in a frenzy, unfastening the buttons on my leather jacket. Alan, Morgan, and Brielle were behind me as we left the grand hall, stepping into the darkness. I was about to head to the direction where Sheila had left with that impostor when there was an unexpected explosion within the castle grounds that shook the earth and buildings, sending everyone flying. The night's air was filled with smoke and the stench of burning chaos and deaths. What was that? Morgan yelled, coughing into the chaos that had broken free around as the blasting music died instantly, and the crowd in the grand hall came rushing out. Jax, Nate! I yelled through the mind link, connecting to the warriors that were patrolling around the pack, but nothing came. I couldn't feel them, I couldn't connect with them. I tried mind linking a few warriors but nothing. It was like every connection with my people had been broken. Just then, the destructive sounds of several explosions filled the air, and smoke and death settled around. This is an attack. I growled loudly, informing everyone, hearing several growls and screams from every corner of the pack. We've been infiltrated. The pack's army had dispersed around the pack. I rushed outside the castle gates and the entire pack was in ruins. Destruction and blood everywhere. Alpha, I was mind-linked by Xavier. Talk to me, Xavier. What's happening? I rushed. We are being attacked. The warriors at the borders are dead, and I can't find Jax. He drew in a quick breath. From the way he was talking, he seemed injured. They are an army of witches and vampires. They bear the mark of the Black Dragon. What? The Black Dragon? I froze. They were from the Dark Circle. Oh goddess, Sheila! I had to get to Sheila. I started searching for the castle doors in a hurry, searching for Sheila. I could still get a whiff of her scent. I followed it and it led me to my office. I reached for the doorknob and jerked it open. She wasn't there, and instead, I was greeted by the messy state of my office. It was in ruins. Sheila had been here. Her scent was everywhere, and so was another's. But she was gone. No. No. The ground beneath me rocked and trembled angrily. Sheila! I screamed her name with my powers radiating off my body like a tsunami hitting the place and causing destruction. Sheila's point of view. I moved as fast as I could with my wolf's speed, racing out of the castle to find the disaster that had covered the pack. Dark smoke filled the air, and the smell of death invaded my nostrils. I tried to connect once more to Killian or anyone, but it wasn't working. I left the castle grounds and headed for the pack house. The pack was filled with chaos as the Dark Circle army had already attacked. I lifted my gaze to the sky to find a black veil hovering on the earth, covering the entire pack. My blue eyes widened as fear rose within me at the sight. That was the work of dark magic and has been placed on the pack to prevent the use of magic. And from it, several balls of flames fell, scattering around the pack. And several balls of flames were heading to the witch's quarters. Fear and panic kicked into my bones as I began heading to the quarters instead. Everyone at the quarters was in grave danger, and that included my brother. I shared control with 80 and we moved at great speed. We were almost at the quarters when right before my eyes the witch's quarters exploded. The force from the explosion attempted to throw me away. I blocked its harsh impact using my magic, racing further to the quarters or what was left of it. The whole place was destroyed and covered with a cloud of suffocating smoke. I dispersed the smoke with my magic, finding a clear view of several lifeless bodies destroyed by the explosion while some were badly wounded. I reached for the nearest witch I could find. Tara. She was badly wounded. I placed my hand on her, attempting to heal her when I felt a murdering sensation in my neck that sent a jolt of immense pain around my body. My fingers found the spot on my neck and I realized I was wounded and black fluid rushed out from my neck. I had no idea how that happened. I paused on that thought as a realization kicked in. He had somehow done this to me. The small injury kept enlarging as I healed Tara. It was as though the more I used my magic, it became worse. Where's Kai? I questioned Tara, fighting the pain that had begun to spread around my body. She glanced around. I don't know. He was here when it all happened. My heart jammed as I began to look for him among the several bodies that covered the ground. And even though I tried to, I couldn't stop the fearful feeling in my chest. Kaiser's point of view, I just arrived at the witch's quarters. Immediately, I hurried into the courts, took off my mask, and headed inside in search of Valerie and Lorenzo. I was moving with immense quickness, eager to find those two. There was an unexplainable tightness within my chest, and it all started when I met Sheila and heard everything she had to say. She was worried, and her soul was troubled. I could feel it, and frankly, I was glad I was here. I had to find Valerie and Enzo and find out what in God's name was going on. I heaved a sigh, barging into one of the spell rooms where Valerie and Lorenzo usually dwelt. Unfortunately, I couldn't find them but found Gwen instead. As soon as her eyes found me, she lowered her head and began walking towards me. Alpha, she called, surprised to see me. What are you doing here? I can't seem to find Valerie and Lorenzo, do you know where they might be? I queried her, and she shook her head. I haven't seen Valerie all day, and Lorenzo should be at the castle, she responded. He isn't there, I said, and her brows crippled, and she was about to say something before the loud and disturbing mutters from outside gained our attention as the chaos outside found its way in. Gwen and I exchanged quick glances before hastening outside into the witch's courtyard. Many witches from the coven dashed outside into the surrounding darkness. One of the witches rushed to Gwen and me as we joined the large crowd. Tara, what's going on? Gwen asked her as I stepped deeper into the darkness. My eyes lifted up, following the gazes of the witches. I froze as my deep hazel orbs rounded. My enlarged crystals scanned the large black veil that covered the entire witch's quarters and most probably the entire pack. This is bad. Tara began, and I turned to face both her and Gwen. It's a barrier veil, I said quickly, shocked. What? Gwen moved deeper into the shadows, her eyes now raised. My heart began to hammer hard against my chest. This wasn't good. This was a barrier spell, meant to impede the use of magic. I was about to say something when, out of nowhere, several balls of bright flames broke through the veil, heading for the quarters in a hurry and causing great explosions around them. The intensity of its explosion flung me away, and I collapsed against a hard surface, feeling pain over my body. I groaned weakly as my breathing came out short. I couldn't feel my body, and every attempt I made to move it created an unbearable pain, eating through my flesh and aching my bones. The explosion had badly wounded me, and I wasn't healing. Oh, goddess, Sheila! I had to get to her. I tried connecting to Leonardo through our pack's mind link, but I couldn't. The entire witch's quarters were covered with smoke and the stench of burning flesh. This was the work of witches, and they attacked the quarters first in order to get rid of the witches. I tried connecting with my wolf. He was injured as well but was in a much better state. I gave my wolf full control. I had to find my sister. I couldn't stop the fear that kept stabbing my chest at the thought of harm coming to her. I wouldn't be able to bear it. I began to shift into my gargantuan grey wolf. I groaned at the murderous pain that had begun to pierce my very soul, as my transformation was slow and agonizing because of my wounded state. The pain lasted for a few minutes, and I was able to shift into my wolf. Through the sharp sight of my wolf, I could see several bodies of witches lying on the earth, while some were alive but badly wounded as well. Without wasting time, my wolf and I sprinted off, heading to the castle. The entire pack was covered with smoke from explosions. The fear within me grew more intense as I realized a war had broken out. My wolf sniffed the air, and all we could smell was the stench of burning corpses and deaths. Also, I paused, completely frozen on the spot. I recognized another familiar but unsettling odor. It was that of vampires and rogues. Plenty of them. My blood turned cold. The dark circle. I could never be mistaken. Why were they here? Oh no! As much as I hated the sudden realization, I knew why they were there. They were here for Sheila. More than ever, I had to find her. I fought the pain and drowsiness clouding my vision. I was losing a lot of blood, but I kept running faster, moving past the chaos and fighting going on around me. Even some of the guests that had attended the party had joined the fight. I was almost at the castle when a thundering growl echoed into the air, rippling through the trees and causing a tremble against the earth. I approached the castle gates, and just then, I noticed Kilian burst through the doors in a frenzy. "Find Sheila!" He growled loudly in his half-beastly form. He was sharing full control with his wolf, and his eyes were a terrifying pair of bloodshot irises. He dashed off in a different direction, moving quickly in the darkness. He seemed to be trailing something. Sheila's scent. I followed him right away. He was on his way to the pack house, which was about a mile away. My wolf moved faster on its paws. Instead of stopping at the pack house, Kilian moved past it, heading into the woods. I kept on following him into the woods. He took a short route and burst out in a large meadow that covered a wide distance between the pack house and the witch's quarters. Kilian stopped abruptly, causing my wolf to halt instantly. I moved my eyes past him to the large meadow where another fight was going on. "Sheila," my voice echoed weakly in the corners of my wolf's mind. She was surrounded by the Dark Circle's army of feral wolves and vampires. But she wasn't alone. She was fighting alongside some of Kilian's warriors, including Morgan. I joined the fight, regardless of the unusual weakness in my bones, and it had started to affect my wolf as well. I moved closer to where she was, but before I could get to her, Kilian did. It was then that I noticed something was wrong with my sister. She was wounded in her neck and bleeding profusely. She wasn't healing. Another careful look and I realized it wasn't just a wound. It was something far worse than that, something that made both Kilian's and my blood turn cold. Valerie's point of view. I was forced to step out of the castle and keep watch over the pack during the ball. My conversation with Sheila a few hours ago left me completely worried, especially about her dreams, and that worried me more. Maybe we should have cancelled the ball after all. The pack had invited many guests to attend from within North Central and beyond, and because of that, we had lowered the protection spell guarding the pack. I was outside in the darkness when I felt the sudden shift in the air. It was almost unnoticeable, but I felt it. I pulled up the hood of my cloak, covering my hair properly. I sauntered back to the castle, heading to the ball in search of Lorenzo. "Come with me," I left the grand hall with Lorenzo and we headed to the northern borders of the pack. "What's happening, Val?" Lorenzo asked, glancing sideways. "I don't know, there's a slight shift in the air, I can't describe it." "Can't you feel it?" I asked, and he shook his head. This wasn't just paranoia, I could feel the sick shift in the air current. I turned to Lorenzo. "We must raise the protection spell, covering the entire pack," I said, and Lorenzo's brows furrowed. "No one will be able to go in or out," he began and I nodded right away. "Precisely," I hurried to the borderline of the pack's territory. Lorenzo caught up with me, and I gripped his hand to channel as much magic as possible that will be needed to cover the entire pack. We were halfway into raising the protection spell when a veil appeared up in the sky, covering the entire pack. "What is that?" I heard Lorenzo mutter behind me, and the fear in my gut rose. "It's trouble," I muttered under my breath, "it's a black veil." "We are stripped of our magic," and my words got stuck as several balls of flames fell from the veil, scattering around the pack. "It's heading for the witch's quarters," Lorenzo's voice filtered into the night. "This is exactly what Sheila feared." "They are here for her," I sounded, feeling a churn within me. "Who are they?" "The Dark Circle, and they've cut us off." "Oh goodness, we need to move now, Lorenzo." "We need to help," I hastened back to our horses. "What's the plan?" "We need to inform Killian," Lorenzo was behind me. "With the looks of things, he already knows." "Everyone knows." I was about to get on my horse when we were surrounded by the Dark Circle minions. Feral wolves. And they were rogues too. They kept spilling into the borders. I got on my horse, and so did Lorenzo, as he unsheathed his sword dangling around his waist. "To the west. We have to get to the cemetery." I yelled at him, as I kicked my horse into motion, heading to the one place where I could put an end to this. The witch cemetery. It was at the western borders and the only place that wasn't affected by the veil. As we kept moving, a few wolves came after us, catching up with us. Lorenzo slowed his fast speed on his horse. "I'll catch up with you." He pulled his horse around to face the wolves behind us. "Lorenzo, be careful," I voiced in worry, sending one glance at him before racing on my horse. I headed to the cemetery. I could hear the howling sounds echo in the smoky darkness and the stench of death mixed with it. It reminded me of the time the Crystal Fortress was attacked and also, the Black Blood Pack. I couldn't let what happened several years ago repeat itself. The Dark Circle mustn't get their hands on Sheila. I kept on moving in a hurry, my hands firmly holding onto the reins of the horse. Time was running out. I had to get to the cemetery and tear down the veil. We needed all the help we could get, and that included the council. From afar, I could see the witch cemetery come into view. I glanced behind me, and Lorenzo hasn't caught up with me yet. The veil had to be lifted, for the sake of everyone, including the coven. I alighted from my horse, racing into the cemetery. As soon as I crossed through the entrance, I felt my magic once more, coursing through my veins. I breathed in relief. The runic symbols that were etched on each corner pillar, the walls, and the earth had life in them as they glowed in the darkness. The magical symbols were protecting the cemetery from the veil's effect. Every witch from the coven that had lost their life was buried here. The magic was in the air, and exactly what I needed to tear down the veil and ask for help. I moved with haste, finding the center of the cemetery. I grabbed the small dagger from under my long dress, slitting my palm, and in an instant, blood rushed from my palm. I used my blood to make a large symbol on the ground. My purple eyes glanced at the veil covering the air, and I stepped into the symbol and began chanting. I needed all the magic I could channel. The magic keeping the veil up was too powerful. I sought nature's magic, gaining access to the earth's magic and every atom I could find around the cemetery. I continued chanting, attempting to tear down the veil when I felt another presence in the cemetery. I pulled my eyes open and Lorenzo came into view. His clothes were drenched in blood, and on his shoulder, he held an almost lifeless body, while his hand dragged another of the Dark Circle minions who was also a second from joining his ancestors. "Why did you bring them here?" He tossed them against the ground, moving closer to where I was. "They will be of help. They are everywhere. Vampires and rogues. Things are bad outside, Valerie, we need to do something." He used his magic and stopped his bleeding, stepping into the symbol, and we began chanting. It took a while, but Lorenzo and I managed to create a crack in the magic holding the veil, and soon, we were able to tear it down. It took away an enormous amount of magic from me. I breathed weakly as my purple eyes lifted to the sky and the veil was no more. I met Lorenzo's gaze. "You have to go and help the others." "And you?" My eyes fell on the bodies he had brought here. And he was right. They would be of great use to get rid of the Dark Circle army. I will finish it all from here. But please, find Sheila and protect her. The skin on Lorenzo's forehead folded, he knew exactly what I was thinking. They are an army. There's no way you can take them all at once in this state, the veil took a lot from you. What you are proposing will consume you and it'll be disastrous. I held his hand firmly. No. The Dark Lord getting his hands on the White Wolf will be destruction itself. Find her and protect her at all cost. I pushed him away. There was no time to argue. He spared me one last look, before exiting the cemetery. As soon as he left, I used my magic and blood to create an urgent message. Only the heavens know what will become of this night, but I had to inform the council heads and Leonardo of what was going on. It was paramount that we stopped the Dark Circle's army from leaving with the White Wolf. For the first time, I admitted the fear in my heart, and I prayed to the heavens that tonight doesn't become another tragedy. Using my magic, I conjured an old symbol up in the night sky. It was that of the Crystal Fortress and was used for desperate situations. Anyone seeing it would know exactly what it meant. I moved to the bodies. The wolf was still alive. He was badly injured by Lorenzo's sword and wasn't healing from the effect of the wolf's bane, while the vampire was dead. But they'll both do. I slit the wrist of both of them, allowing their blood to soak the earth. The ritual I was about to perform was deadly and required a lot of magic. I would be linking their blood to every wolf and vampire that was within the pack and belonged to the Dark Circle. That way, if these imbeciles ended up dead, the same would happen to every of the Dark Circle rogues and vampires. I got to work, channeling all the magic around, filling up my energy, and I began the ritual, creating a connection. I pushed my eyes closed and started chanting, shutting my external senses. I dived deep into my essence, now gaining permission from the earth's magic. I could feel its magic rushing in, the feeling was so familiar. Without delay, I began channeling the earth's magic. Earth magic is the oldest form of magic, and surprisingly, this territory has magic buried in the earth. Its magic is pure and dangerous as well when witches push beyond their limit. I could feel the earth's elements and forces of nature welcoming me. I fought against the exhaustion that slowly invaded my body, alerting me that I was pushing hard and exerting my energy. I felt the warm fluid that flowed from my nose in a warning. The ritual was draining me, but I couldn't stop now, letting all my efforts so far be wasted. I was almost done. I gasped weakly, falling to my knees. It was done. I felt my blood absconding me and the corners of my eyes burned. I couldn't feel anything, and my vision was covered by complete darkness. I collapsed on the ground. Sheila's point of view, I felt the hair on my skin stand, and then, I felt Killian. I felt his presence. My eyes scanned hurriedly across the meadow where I was fighting alongside Morgan and some of our warriors, against the Dark Circle wolves and vampires. I couldn't begin to describe the relief that flooded my chest as my blue eyes narrowed in on Killian. I had been worried, going crazy in search of Killian. I had been really scared something might have happened to him. That imbecile made it clear to me that he was after Killian's life. I would never be able to forgive myself if the unthinkable had happened to Killian. This was all my fault. I should have said something the second I began having those dreams about him. If I had, we wouldn't be in this situation. The pack won't be attacked and the lives of everyone I love wouldn't be in danger right now. Killian was next to me in a flash, and just then, I noticed Kaiser as well. He was in his wolf form. Killian's amber eyes connected with mine for a broken second, before his eyes fell on my wounded neck. They both joined the fight, and I tried my best to use less of my magic. The wound on my neck had enlarged, and the bleeding only became worse. Dark lines began to appear on my skin. I had no idea what he had done to me, but whatever it was, I knew it wasn't meant to kill me. I just knew it. But the pain that shot through my body was undeniable, and I was growing weaker by the second. We kept on with the fight, and to my surprise, the black veil that had covered the entire pack was lifted, and the night sky came into view. A small smile found my lips, as this meant the witches now had access to their magic. I plucked out the hearts of the wolves that came at me, aiming for the one next to me when a symbol appeared up in the night sky. It belonged to the Crystal Fortress witches. And instantly, familiar magical energy swept through the earth, and all at once, the Dark Circle minions collapsed on the ground. It was Valerie. What just happened? Morgan asked as our gazes scanned the lifeless bodies of our enemy that covered the earth. Valerie, I muttered, weakly. She was behind this, and that made my chest tighten. With the enormous wave of energy that danced around, she had lost a lot of her magic carrying out this ritual. Oh, goddess! I hoped she was all right. What happened to you? Killian asked, cupping my face as his eyes scanned over my neck. He did this to me. He was here, Killian. The Dark Lord, I said, and Killian's brows furrowed. What? He pulled me closer to him and was about to say something when the whole land was covered with dark mist. This wasn't my doing. It was someone else. What the fudge? Everyone drew closer as heavy loud thuds from the movement against the earth echoed from almost everywhere within the mist, causing the earth beneath us to shake from its heavy impact. There was no way anyone could see anything in the mist. But as the heavy steps drew closer, I felt it. Them. They were dark witches, and from the enormous magical energy that charged at us, they were in great numbers and were here for blood. Get down! I yelled, feeling the sharp metals that pierced through the mist. I evaded the mist at once and created a shield around us, just in time to stop the silver weapons that were flying in the air charging at us. It looked like a normal knife with a sharpened silver rod in place of a blade. I redirected it back, pulling down the shield. I felt sharp pains connect with my spine, crippling me. And immediately, they came into view. Dark witches from the circle dressed in red attacked us in great numbers. Killian and the warriors fought back as well, and soon, we were joined by Lorenzo together with an army of warriors and witches from Killian's pack and Leonardo's pack. The fight began, and with every second, more of the dark circle witches kept joining. I made full use of my wolf's abilities instead, but they weren't lunging at me. More like they were completely avoiding me. I snapped the head of one of the witches, watching her fall to the ground. My eyes drifted sideways and fell on a figure, standing far in the woods, away from the chaos that was going on in the field. He was dressed in all black, had long black hair, and held a black sword in his left hand. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I could tell he wasn't from here. His aura was dark and powerful. A dark witch. His dark eyes connected with mine briefly and slowly drifted somewhere else. I followed the direction of his gaze and it fell on Killian. My heartbeat spiked up and I glanced back to the woods where he had been, but he had vanished. In terror, my eyes combed through the field for him and I found him. My body became stiff as I felt my blood turn cold and the air in my lungs vanished. My blue depths shifted from his dark eyes, which were unmoving, from mine to Killian, who was a few steps away from the man and completely oblivious to his presence as he kept on fighting. No! 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 Killian! I screamed, gaining Killian's attention. His eyes met mine from afar and I screamed again. Behind you! Killian swerved around and attacked right away, but the witch effortlessly evaded him. I used my wolf's speed to race to him. I was almost there when it all happened so fast. In a second, the witch vanished from sight, and almost immediately, he appeared right behind Killian. He lifted the black sword in his left hand, sending a glance my way, before using his magic, sending it straight into Killian's heart. I felt a sharp piercing in my chest the instant it pierced into Killian's. The hilt of the sword glowed a bright red shade, as it moved deeper into Killian's chest, its pointed edge coming out on the other side. I was completely frozen, like time itself had paused. Killian groaned as he collapsed on his knees, his hands gripping the hilt of the sword, in an attempt to pull it out. Killian!" I yelled, bridging the insane gap between us. Before his body fell to the ground, I caught him in my arms. I couldn't pay attention to anything else but him, not even to Morgan's scream that filtered into the corner walls of my mind. I held onto the hilt, trying to pull it out, but I couldn't. It's been enchanted, and the red glow on the hilt was sucking out Killian's life. "Killian, look at me," I tried to keep his eyes from shutting close as I began chanting, in an attempt to stop the effect of the sword's magic. But it was of no use, and Killian's body had begun to desiccate. And I felt it, a sharp tearing in my chest, almost as if a piece of my soul had been torn out ruthlessly. I couldn't feel his heartbeat. I couldn't feel Killian inside of me. I couldn't feel his wolf either. Adi released a loud, piercing howl within me, shattering the corners of my soul. "Killian, please," I clung to his cold and lifeless body. My body was enveloped by a merciless pain that charged within me. I could feel it from the depth of my soul, crushing me while it vibrated against my bones, stabbing every piece of my existence. I felt like dying. My body became so hot, and the pain from the wound on my neck was torturing me. More tears rolled down my eyes as I pulled out the sword from Killian's body. The sword's sharp blade slit my right palm. I groaned at the burning pain, but it couldn't compare to anything I was feeling at the moment. He was gone. Killian was dead. I shut my eyes, and I released a sharp scream. The wound from my neck intensified, tugging at my chest in a warning. But I couldn't stop. I kept on screaming, and the chaos around me intensified. The earth tore into several cracks. I heard several howls and gasps around, but I didn't stop. I wanted to release the smoldering pain within me, but that alone wasn't enough. The pain from my neck had invaded my soul, and I felt my whole body weaken and my mind fuzzy. My hold on Killian's body weakened and I crashed against the ground, losing consciousness. The last thing I managed to see was Killian's lifeless body, and a glowing light appeared behind us. It was more like a portal. My long lashes fluttered weakly against each other once more before they gave up, and I felt myself being pulled away. Sheila's point of view. I inhaled deeply, shifting under the warm silken covers. I turned gently on the bed, leaning deeper into the soft pillows as my eyes fell on that of my mate, sleeping next to me. I pulled closer to him, my blue eyes taking in all of him. I shut my eyes momentarily, breathing in his scent. It was a new dawn already, and even though the thick draperies had blocked out all lights, I could feel the gentle warmth of the sunlight that waited outside for me. I pulled my eyes open, firmly holding the covers around my body when I felt his presence at the back of my mind. "I'm sorry I woke you up. I wanted you to sleep in for a few more minutes," I smiled, turning to peck his lips, pulling my eyes to meet his deep golden eyes. His strong arms gripped my waist, pinning me against the bed, and slowly, he leaned in to kiss me. I kissed him back, matching his fierce kisses. He pulled the covers away, pressing his body to mine, as his lips began trailing kisses down my jawline, moving to my marking spot where his mark was deeply rooted. My hands moved skillfully on his body, stimulating him to the point I felt his almost unnoticeable moans against my skin. I bit the bottom of my lips, my hands getting lost in his shoulder-length golden hair that matched his twin golden flames that gazed down at me with love and fascination. I felt it through the bond we shared. It was unique and powerful, and frankly, like nothing I've ever felt. You are mine, darling. Mine alone, he whispered through our link, and a smile found my lips as I shared similar emotions. I love you, Vlad. My lips captured his in a kiss and we were about to take things quite further, but he was mind-linked all of a sudden, and regardless of what had happened to me a few weeks ago, I was as well connected to Vladimir's pack and coven beyond the fortress and within the oasis through the mate bond. What is it? Vlad queried in a gruff, and I pulled up in a sitting position as Vlad pulled away from me. I apologize, Dark Lord, but we have some important information regarding the wolves in the east. Vlad's demeanor hardened as his golden eyes blazed at me from within his long thick lashes. He was up instantly, while I remained on the bed, watching him. Tell the others to wait. We'll be there in a moment, he replied, and the presence at the back of our minds through the link retreated. Vlad gripped one of his black garments from the rack, pulling it over him. He moved back to the bed where I was still positioned, leaning down to kiss me. I'll be out in a few minutes, I told him through our link as he pulled away. I sank deeper into the warmth of the bed when I heard the usual sharp knock on the door. You may enter, I spoke in a voice they could hear and they both stepped in, bowing their heads in respect. Sybil and Callie were witches and belonged to the Dark Circle Coven. I got up from the bed, donning a silken robe, while Sybil went into the washing room to prepare the tub for me to shower, and Callie fixed a dress for me. I sauntered into the washroom, taking off my robe. I climbed into the tub and sank my body into the hot water. It was refreshing. I took my time to get my body washed, and by the time I went back to my chamber, Callie had prepared a dress for me. It was black, elegant, and anything but simple and plain. The witches helped me get ready for it, and I took a glance at myself in the mirror once more. My blue eyes moved from the natural curls of my brown hair that now had a noticeable shade of blue growing on them. It fell neatly on both sides of my shoulders, stopping at my stomach. My eyes glided to the crook of my neck where the mark of my mate stood in a flaming golden color, having the shape of a dragon. My eyes lingered on it for a second, before they pulled away. My eyes closed briefly for a second as I felt the scar that was etched on my palm. I opened my eyes and they fell on it. It was a deep wound made from the sharp blade of a sword. I paused all my thoughts and cleared my mind of all silly emotions, exiting my chamber for the Dragon Court. The biggest hall in the whole of the fortress. Vlad loved having his meetings there, especially when they were important like today. I kept moving with Sybil and Callie tailing behind me. They were always with me, and I liked to think of them as my shadows. I was at the black diamond doors of the Dragon Court, and immediately, it was opened for me. My eyes fell on the large individuals that were seated around the black circular crystal table. I lifted my chin and walked inside. As usual, they were waiting for my arrival before starting the meeting. I took my seat right opposite Vladimir with the black crystal table separating us. Begin, Vlad's deep voice sounded throughout the court. And Elias, one of Vladimir's most trusted leaders of the vampire coven, stood up from his seat. My eyes fell on the wide map spread out on the table with red crosses and green circles dotted all over some small drawings and writings. It was a map encompassing all of the regions in the north, west, south, and east. Every region in the east had red crosses on them, which meant they'd already been targeted and destroyed by our armies, and up until a week ago, the West Central still had few regions that haven't been targeted yet, but according to the map, not anymore. They've been targeted and destroyed. Every region in the West has been attacked, my lord, Elias spoke with a smirk, highly satisfied with the results. We had encountered some problems conquering some regions in the West that were affiliated with the Council. The Council had fought hard to prevent the destruction of the West regions that were under their control, but it was of no use. Our army was stronger and we had an impressive number and the right power at our disposal. They didn't stand a chance against us, and will never. We always grew in numbers. From every attack, our armies always bring prisoners to the oasis. Prisoners from several magical kinds. They are branded and molded to our liking and forced to work for us by their own will, or against their will. It doesn't matter. The Dark Circle always has a special way of keeping one in line. My eyes retracted from the map and I found Vlad's intense gaze on me, piercing right into my soul. A small smile found my lips. There was something about his gaze that was capable of seeing right through me. It was fascinating how he always managed to know exactly what I was thinking and feeling. It was like every print of me was molded in him. Excellent, Elias. Good job, Vlad finally spoke in his rich accented voice. His interesting golden eyes never drifted from mine. Splendid news. We should proceed on to the next. We have limited time already on our hands. We should make South Central our next target, before heading for North, Festus, a feral wolf suggested. I do agree with Festus, and indeed we do have limited time on our hands. He sounded icy, making cold air escape my lungs slowly as my blue eyes drifted from Vladimir's and fell on him. Nikolai. Vladimir's shadow itself and warlock. A powerful one. And I could also deem him as my savior whom Vladimir sent to rescue me from the hands of the council and every one of those wolves who wanted me dead. His dark eyes moved from the map, scanning around the members seated at the table before they fell on me. Although the Queen and I still have pending issues at the Dark Cave, I do propose we move on to North Central. His gaze shifted to Vlad's, whose eyes were still on me. What do you suggest, darling? At his question, the dragon court fell into silence. My eyes narrowed on the map once more, glancing over the green circles dotted over several regions on the south and north. I couldn't fight the emotion called rage that took dominance of my mind. My eyes met with that of my mate. I do agree with Nikolai on this one. We suffered a delay in the west because of the council and their reinforcement. North Central has the largest covens, kingdoms, and packs in all of the lands. The best thing is to take them down. They won't see it coming, as they would expect the south to be next. It's no secret how much I detest the north for a reason. I have suffered greatly at their hands and lost everything because of them. My wolf, my family, and important years of my life. I hate them all, especially the council and the wolves pack. So, I'm afraid I'm with Nikolai in this one. North Central should be targeted next, and I want every one of those wolves, especially the Crescent North pack, and the Black Blood pack. I paused, leaning against the table as I forced out everything I needed to feel. The rage, and hate. One has the largest pack in the whole region while the other has the most resources. Taking them down will be a major blow to the council. I voiced out everything I was feeling, and all through, my blue depths never left that of my mate as a small, intriguing smirk found his lips. Sheila's point of view. I curled my right hand into a ball, feeling the scar on my palm. It reminded me of my rage, and everything I had lost, and the only emotion that filled my mind was hate, rage, and a maddening drive for revenge. My gaze softened as I felt my mate's comforting presence inside the corner walls of my mind, reminding me he would be there for me, always. Meeting adjourned, his voice filled the air, commandingly, and immediately, everyone was up from their seats, leaving the dragon's court until it remained just my mate and me. He pulled up from his chair, stalking to where I was seated. It enrages me to see you in so much pain, love. His large hand caressed my cheek. It was cold as usual, but I couldn't help but lean into it. My eyes fell on his flawless, and uniquely pale face. Vladimir was of mixed blood, being both a vampire and a wolf. He was one of the old wolves that magically transitioned into a vampire. I hated too. But what do I do with this anger I feel? Remember, Vlad, I lost everything because of those imbeciles, and I wait patiently for the day I will make everyone pay, I said, and he pulled closer to me, engulfing me in his arms. Remember, you have me. And you will always have me, he said, kissing me. And I thank the goddess every day for that. I cannot begin to imagine what harm would have come to me if you hadn't come to rescue me. My slender hands snaked around his neck, getting lost in his smooth hair. Thank you, I begged. Every one of those mutts will all pay for everything they have done to you. It's my promise to you, Sheila, he kissed me. And revenge tastes better when served without a hurry. Once we conquer South Central first, they'll know that they are next and they will not be spared. Every one of them must witness what is to come. And they will, I kissed him back. I have to go to the dark cave and prepare for tonight's ritual, hopefully, it'll be a success. I stood up from the chair, exiting the dragon court with Vladimir. I left him and headed for my chamber with Sybil and Callie behind me first before leaving for the dark cave. I grabbed a black furry coat and placed it over my dress. I roved to the black windows. With a small wave of my hand, I used my magic to pull apart the draperies, and the black windows unlocked, pushing open. The warmth from the sunlight descended on me, but unfortunately, I could feel nothing at all. From the top floor of my chamber, it was impossible to get a full view of the entire oasis. I couldn't see beyond the fortress grounds. I gazed at the burning sun for a while with absolutely nothing running through my mind, before exiting my chamber. Sybil and Callie were waiting for me outside my chamber. We left the fortress and stepped out into the sun. We got on our horses and left the fortress grounds, heading for the dark cave. This place was called the Oasis. It was quite different from anything I had ever seen, and heavily protected. It's been almost 8 weeks now since I was rescued by Vladimir and his army from the hands of those I call my enemies. I had been living at their mercy for so long after I was taken away from my family here in the Oasis. The Council, the Black Blood Pack, and... I paused for a split second, before continuing. And the Crescent North Pack had murdered my entire family, and kidnapped me for years, trying to make use of me and my powers as much as they could. But Vladimir rescued me. He had sent every army of his and didn't stop until he had me right beside him. The place I was held captive was attacked and many lost their lives, including the alpha of the pack. He had lost his life in the hands of Vladimir's warlock, Nikolai. He had saved me, although my wolf, 80, didn't make it. I was badly wounded during the war. I managed to make it out alive, but she didn't. She sacrificed herself for me to live. It was important I did because I had to avenge her and the deaths of everyone else I had lost. This is the only truth that I chose to believe. My hold on the reins of my horse tightened as we took the path into the square. Oasis belonged to Vladimir and it was guarded with the magic of 1,000 witches. There was no way in, once someone got in here, and no way out. The Dark Circle always takes in magical beings who are deemed useful. They become prisoners at first, and then are tortured and trained in the worst possible way until they are broken, and then the circle molds them into loyal warriors that are willing to die for the great cause. Every magical being was placed together and has its unique training process which often takes time. Vladimir was smart enough to have his witches devise a method to strip his prisoners of their powers. Every prisoner that is brought into the oasis always has a pyramid symbol imprinted on them. Just like the one on my wrist. But mine doesn't strip me of my magic is only limited. Vladimir did this for my safety alone, to protect me from outside the protective barriers of the oasis who wants me back. And I do agree with him. My presence here was much needed for our great cause. I pulled my eyes away from the symbol on my wrist. It ensures they are unable to use their powers until they are taken into training, and broken, then branded. They are always tested, and if they turn out successful, and are deemed worthy enough to make it into the Dark Circle army, they are welcomed as a member of Vladimir's army. I rode into the woods with Sybil and Callie behind me on their horses. I could feel the enormous magic holding the oasis. This was the reason no one outside the walls could ever find this place. It has existed for over 4 centuries, and it's being held by the magic of so many witches, dead and alive. It also draws from nature's magic from the earth and air. Finally, we arrived at the dark cave. I alighted from my horse and handed it over to Callie, making my way into the tunnel. I moved past the narrow path in darkness until I got to the first lamp that burned against the wall. I began to follow the trail as several lamps came into view. Though it wasn't really necessary, I had spent most of my time here since I returned to the oasis. I reached my destination, finding Randall at the entrance. He was one of Nikolai's witches. I handed over my coat to him, stepping through the darkness that covered the entrance. The dark cave was restricted for everyone, including members of the circle. Only a few had the authorization to be in the cave, which was Vladimir, Nikolai, and myself, while the others were dark witches from Nikolai's coven. I stepped through the darkness and Nikolai was in there with some dark witches. They lowered their heads, noticing my presence. I scanned around briefly before my eyes fell on Nikolai. "Where is she?" He shifted his gaze to one of the witches, nodding. It didn't take up to a second when the crying sound of a female echoed within the cave. I tilted my head a little, and my eyes fell on a young female that was being dragged to us wearing ragged clothes. She seemed like one of our prisoners, and the black pyramid symbol on her wrist confirmed my thoughts. She was young and looked like she was no more than 16. My eyes drifted to Nikolai, whose dark eyes were on me. "She's a new prisoner we found in the East Central, from an ancient clan," he informed me, and my eyes fell on the young girl once more. She was blindfolded, and her hands chained together. Frankly, she was the youngest that had been brought to the cave since my arrival. Her magic, I need to feel it, I told him. Nikolai was the only witch in the oasis that could lift the magic of the pyramid binding a prisoner. He fixed a brief gaze on me, before moving to the young girl. He tore off her blindfold, and her watery chartreuse eyes and her tears and resistance against the witch's hold intensified. Nikolai grabbed her hand, placing a finger on the pyramid symbol on her wrist. He muttered a few chants, breaking the magic of the pyramid. The witch held her in place, while I placed my hands on her head. I closed my eyes, connecting to her magic. It was indeed powerful. And might just be what we needed. My eyes snapped open and they fell on Nikolai. You are right. Her magic is indeed powerful. She would do. I turned to the witch surrounding us. Prepare her for the ritual. No, please. Spare me, I beg of you. Please, her screams and cries filled the air as she was dragged away. But it didn't matter. Here in Oasis, nothing mattered. I watched the young girl until she faded out of sight. Nikolai came up behind me. Do you think her magic will be able to contain it? She is young, and her magic is pure. Not to worry, Nikolai, she would be a great vessel, I voiced, leaving the cave to prepare for the ritual. Sheila's point of view, it was already twilight. Darkness had blinded everywhere and the sky had a full moon hanging on it. I was in the cave along with Nikolai and his entire coven of witches. We had made preparations for the ritual already, and all that was left was the presence of the young female. Everyone was cautious and ready. Tonight's ritual was important. For Vladimir and the Dark Circle. It was important for me too, and deep down the corner walls of my heart, I hoped for my desired result. I jerked from my thoughts when the cries of the young female filtered into the cave and she was dragged in by the witches and dressed in black. I was told she goes by the name, Lily. She was forced into the creek filled with crystalline waters conjured by the power of the 4 phoenix stones. There was an enormous magic coursing through the place. It was dark and powerful, and precisely what was needed for tonight's ritual. She is all yours, Nikolai turned to me. I walked closer to the creek, pulling down the hood covering my brown hair. My gaze caught that of the female in the water and the witches took their positions around the water. It was time. This wasn't my first time anchoring this ritual. I had anchored it several times after my arrival here in Oasis. And I was beginning to lose count of the number of times I had anchored it. But unfortunately, none of the rituals yielded the result Vladimir desired. None at all. It was either the vessel was too weak or the magic wasn't strong enough to contain it. We were about to perform a kind of ritual that was deemed impure and dark 1,000 years ago. A resurgent ritual. A necessary ritual that would give Vladimir what he wanted, and that was access to Shota's magic. It was one of the darkest and most powerful magic that had existed at the earliest dawn of magic itself. I had no idea it even existed. It was only a week after I arrived at this place that Vladimir brought me here and apprised me of everything. His plans and the future he envisions for our realm. It was so impeccable that I couldn't refuse to help. Let's begin, I said, as I began to channel the magic of the 4 phoenix stones. They were ancient stones that held great magic, and all 4 stones together were capable of performing great impossibility. The witches began chanting, while Nikolai took a step backward. He wasn't part of tonight's ritual. I channeled enough magic and the magic from the stones surrounded the water. The pleas and screams from the young female were muffled by the witch's chants as we began our work. She was struggling in the water in fear, her magic was fighting against the power of the stones, trying to break free. The witch's chants intensified and all of a sudden, she sprung out of the water, but I used my magic and held her still in the air. Jaskier, one of the coven witches, brought the dagger to be used specifically for this ritual. I took it from him, moving closer to the young girl's body that was dangling above the water. As I brought the blade to her neck, I heard her crying voice at the back of my mind. "Please, help me. Please, I don't want to die." Her eyes welled with tears as I pressed the sharpness of the dagger to her neck. "Your death is the only way for you to live." Without hesitating, I slit her throat, and her body fell back into the water, her blood mixing with the water. I moved back to the runic symbols with the dagger smeared in her blood. I continued with the witch's chants and her blood moved from the dagger, dropping on the runic symbol which glowed brightly, causing the water that has been mixed with the girl's blood to boil rigorously. We continued the spell, reaching its peak when every torch in the cave died instantly, leaving us in darkness. This had always happened during every one of our rituals. Once again, the ritual didn't work. The torches lit back on, and Nikolai moved closer to me. What could have happened this time? His dark eyes turned on me. "I don't know. Maybe we still haven't found the right vessel," I muttered, turning to Jaskier and a few witches. "Get rid of the body." My eyes fell once more on the young female floating in the pool of her blood, before exiting the cave. I left the dark cave, getting on my horse. It was still at the peak of midnight and the full moon was still up. I held on to the reins of the horse, feeling the usual pain from the scar etched on my palm. It was already a reminder of what needed to be done. We headed towards the fortress, passing through the village where the prisoners are held before they are taken for their training. Even so late at night, they were still training under the supervision of the Dark Circle army. I kept on moving on my horse, taking the path to the square that led to the fortress when I saw it. The arrow that was headed my way at great speed, aiming at me. I had a few seconds to move out of the way, but for some reason, I didn't want to. I watched it as its pointed head pierced my shoulder. I heard the deafening sounds of chaos breaking around. Sybil and Callie surrounded me while the warriors around lunged at the prisoners. But I remained frozen on my horse as I held the arrow I pulled out from my shoulder. It was covered with my blood, and the other end of the arrow had a small attachment to its side. It was a small crafted symbol of a place I never thought I'd see in a long while. I felt my cold hand tremble as I fought the urge to gaze into the crowd of prisoners that were handled by the warriors. My heartbeat began to drum in a different rhythm as I tried my hardest to repress my emotions that were about to resurface. As Sybil and Callie rushed closer to my side, I used my magic and turned the arrow into dust, sticking the small object to my dress. Before they could ask, I spoke. "I am fine. Let's keep moving." I kicked my horse in motion, moving at a fast speed until we reached the fortress. I absconded my horse, and hurried to my chamber, shutting the door close. I pulled out the small crafted object, having the shape of a moon, a crescent moon. Just at the sight, I heard my heart drum harder in my ears and a presence deep within my soul began to rise to the surface and my eyes glowed a blinding shade of blue. I shut my eyes. No. Stay hidden, I whispered more to myself, calming my emotions and locking them away. But it was harder to control the presence that wanted freedom. Oh please, don't be foolish, stay put. I warned, as usual, it was as stubborn as a mule. I was about to speak again when I felt the lurking presence of my mate. He was almost at the door. I pulled my eyes open and they were still having their blue glow. Enough! I yelled, getting full control of my body. The small crafted object vanished from my hand as my eyes returned to normal, and just then, the door pushed open and Vladimir stepped in. His piercing golden eyes took me in as he hastened closer to where I was. He was beyond furious. I could feel his rage from the mate bond. His gaze fell on my shoulders covered with blood. I heard. Every one of those mutts will pay for that blood on your dress, he counted each word so calmly. And I need not ask what he meant by those words. I already had an idea. My silence brought his gaze to mine and he bored down at me as if wanting to take a peek into my very soul. I breathed in deeply, placing my arms around him. Tonight's ritual didn't go as we would have hoped, I sounded, and his gaze pulled from mine and his lips found my neck. I heard, I could note the disappointment in his voice. He pulled away a little and his eyes found mine. Don't worry too much about it, Nikolai has another way to go around it. His words caused a knot in my chest and I fought so hard to keep my emotions stable and transparent. His lips swallowed mine as he picked me up in his arms and carried me to the bed, kissing me. I tried to get lost in the moment. But it was hard to. I didn't know which worried me more, the raging presence deep in my soul or the crafted object I had received which I could smell was a trap. It wouldn't be the first time. If I knew that already, then why do I feel so restless? Kaiser's point of view. I leaned deeper on my arm that was against the wall and my deep hazel eyes never pulled away from her. I watched her as she faded out of sight. It took me everything I had not to go after her. I hoped she was all right. That arrow wasn't meant to hurt her that badly. I just needed it to graze her so I could get her blood on it. But now I was left with nothing. She destroyed the arrow and the only chance I had to get her awake. I heaved a sigh. This was frustrating. This was the first time in weeks that I had her so close. She was almost before me, but I couldn't even approach her. Not with Vladimir's watchdogs always hovering around her. I had to get to her. I had to know exactly what was going on with her. Why on earth was she on his side? How could she suddenly be mated to him? I sighed again. And there I thought Killian was the devil himself. The only thing I cared about was getting to Sheila. Something was wrong with her. And with the way things went on around here, I was more certain every day that Vladimir did something to her. That was the only reason Sheila could ever be at his side, helping him do only the goddess knew what. And that was what worried me the most. If Sheila wasn't really in her right senses, I had to get to her before she did something terrible. All right, lads. Keep training, I jerked out from my thoughts, hearing the barking of the imbecile I had grown to detest. Ren. He was the commanding warrior in charge of the prisoners in training and the first imbecile I was going to kill the second I got Cade, my wolf back. I came out from where I was hiding, moving to the spot my arrow had hit her in hopes I could find even if it was a splatter of her blood on the dried up leaves and dirt that covered the ground. I kept scanning the ground, and my gaze caught something on the dried leaves. Sheila's blood. It was very little, barely a drop. But it could work to get him awake. I hope it did. My eyes glanced back at the route Sheila took. Right now, I could only pray to the goddess that she managed to get my message at least. I had attached a little gift to the arrow. It was the only way I could let her know she wasn't here alone. I hope it reminded her of who she was, and that we were coming for her. I left the training field, taking the hidden path back to the camps set up for the prisoners that were in training. I exhaled deeply for a moment, glancing at the moon. There was something about this oasis that made time move by so fast. It has been many weeks since those imbeciles attacked Killian's pack. It was unexpected. Only the goddess knew how the dark circle found her. But that wasn't important anymore. The painful reality was, they did. They found the white wolf they had been searching for, and they took her. I pulled my eyes closed. Just thinking about it infuriated me, and at the same time, hurt me. I could only imagine what could be going on outside the boundaries of the oasis. Sheila had lost it with Killian's death. I was shocked. I hated Killian so much, and for so long wanted him dead. But regretfully, his death didn't bring me the happiness I had imagined. Instead, it brought nothing but pain to my sister. Losing one's mate could hurt that much, and now, I could imagine how that must have felt. Leonardo would be going crazy, but I knew I would have died if Sheila was taken and I had been left behind. It had happened once when Nell Reed took her and I was left behind. I couldn't let that happen again. Sheila's magic had lost control seeing Killian's body. I had never seen her that way before, never. Her magic created chaos, and in the midst of it, that came through some witch's portal and pulled her in. I couldn't stay still and do nothing. Cade and I jumped in after them right before it closed. I had no idea where we were headed, but I landed in the woods in my human form. Badly wounded and staring at the face of death itself. Something must have happened to Cade during the jump. I didn't know much because I lost consciousness right away. By the time I regained consciousness, it was a week after. I was in a shack, it was a few distances away from the village. Someone had saved me, Xena. A smile found my lips. She was the one good thing in this place. I left the camps, heading for the shack. It's been a few days since I was there. Xena helped me recover, but unfortunately, Cade hasn't. And I couldn't connect with him yet. I walked out of the woods, from a near distance. I could see the shack. I scanned my surroundings to ensure I wasn't followed. It would put both Xena and him in danger. That was the last thing we needed right now. I reached the small entrance, knocking on the door thrice. I could already feel her presence behind the wooden door. "It's me," I muttered, and immediately, the door pulled open. I rushed in. "Kai," her beautiful voice called, as she collapsed in my arms. I wrapped my arms around her, kissing her soft skin. Xena was not only my savior, she was my fated mate. It came to me as a shock as well. I didn't imagine I would find my mate in a place like this. Xena was a prisoner in Oasis as well, and if it wasn't for her, I might have not made it. I kissed her sweetly, pulling away from her. "How did it go? Were you able to see her?" Did you get her blood? She asked with her round beautiful eyes on me. I sighed, shaking my head. I couldn't get close to her. But I got this. Would it work? I showed her the leaf with Sheila's blood on it. It should, she said, as I looked past Zena to the door behind. Who's in there with him? I asked, alarmed. It's Elliot. I called for him. We need his help to perform the spell. I've done the best I can with the potions, but that isn't enough, she said, and I couldn't help but get worried. I didn't trust this Elliot guy. Frankly, I didn't trust anyone here except Zena. If Vladimir ever discovers both our unexpected presence in the oasis, things would become worse than it already was, for us and Sheila. Before that happened, I had to get to Sheila and he had to wake up from whatever slumber he was in. It's been 7 weeks already, and I was running out of time and patience. Don't worry, Kai. We can trust Elliot. This will work, and you'll see your friend will regain consciousness soon. Her hands found my neck. I breathed in deeply. Zena was a witch, and if it wasn't for the rune on her wrist, she would have been able to use her magic. She was taken by the Dark Circle a few years ago, after her coven was attacked, and it was only last week she became a member of Nikolai's coven. That was a good thing. Nikolai was the only warlock in Oasis that could undo the magic of the pyramid restricting the prisoners. Being part of the coven witches, Zena would finally be able to get rid of the pyramid on her wrist and gain access to the fortress where my sister was. The fortress was completely off-limits to everyone. Only members of the Dark Circle and Nikolai Coven witches had access to the fortress. I had tried several times to get in, but it was impossible without getting caught. I rubbed my face roughly with my palm when the door opened and Elliot walked out. How's he? I moved closer to him. Still the same. I tried to break past the spell keeping him in that state, but I couldn't. I've tried everything, but it's not working. Whatever witch placed that spell on him is powerful. I can feel it through the magic itself, he sighed. I'm sorry, Zena, I can't help with this. Only the casting witch who placed the spell on him can undo it, he sounded, and I groaned. That's not possible, I said. I haven't been able to get to Sheila, let alone bring her here. We have her blood, Elliot, Zena informed, showing him the leaf. I know it's not much, but we could give it a try. Please help us. Elliot's gaze went from Zena to the leaf. We could try. He took the leaf and went back to the room. Zena and I followed him, stopping at the wooden bed. My eyes fell on the still body on the bed. He was exactly as I left him a few days ago. Elliot positioned next to him, using his magic, he extracted Sheila's blood and placed it in a container. I'll begin now. I hope this works, he said, and I hope too. My hazel gaze moved to the scar that was in his chest from where Nikolai's sword had pierced his heart. His wounds had healed up, already, but he just wasn't regaining consciousness. I placed a hand on his cold body. You have to wake up, Killian. Sheila badly needs you, I whispered to him, moving to the door. Whatever Elliot was about to do, I badly hoped it would work. As much as I hated to admit it, I needed Killian as well. If Vladimir had done something to my sister, Killian was the best chance I had to save her. It was more of a shock to me when I landed abruptly in Oasis to find Killian's body next to me. I didn't know how that had happened. Maybe I had unknowingly pulled him through the portal, or the force had blown him through the portal. I didn't know. But what I did know was that Killian was lucky. We all witnessed his death. I saw him dead in my sister's arms right before she lost control and her magic took over. I'm guessing that was what happened, and I bet Sheila didn't even know what she had done, just like the night of her awakening. But Killian wasn't dead. Whatever Sheila had done had preserved him all this time, and sent him into a deep, endless slumber instead. Killian has been unconscious for weeks, and every attempt Xena had made to break Sheila's spell on him has been futile. This was our last chance. I shut the door, leaving Xena and Elliot with Killian. I crumbled on the floor, having my back against the wooden wall. "Oh, Goddess, please fix him." Sheila's point of view. I held my breath, laying still under the warm water in the tub. I just wanted some quiet, and the silence lingering in the water was calming. It was enough to hush the wild drumming of my heart. It had been like this since I was shot last night, and I don't know how to make it stop. I knew this was just another test of Vladimir. This wasn't the first time. He was still in doubt and wanted to be certain if I remembered anything. Anything I shouldn't. I closed my eyes, pulling out of the water. I still couldn't believe how fast time had flown in this god-forsaken place. It's been 8 weeks since I was brought here, yet it felt like it was only yesterday it all happened. The attack on my pack and his death. Killian's death. Even with the gate of my eyes jammed shut, tears burned down from my eyes. I wrapped my arms around my body as a murdering coldness enveloped the washing room, piercing my heart. And now, I couldn't stop the tears from escaping as the pain rooted deep in my soul came alive, and today, I couldn't lock it away. I couldn't seem to win against my emotions since I saw the crafted object shaped like a crescent moon. It worked. Whatever Vladimir wanted to achieve by doing that really worked, and right now I was a complete mess. But I had to get over whatever this was before Vladimir returned to Oasis. He had left at the first light of dawn, along with the imbecile, Nikolai. There was an urgent matter he had to tend to. He didn't say, but I knew it was related to the unending attacks made by the North on packs, kingdoms, and covens affiliated with the Dark Circle. I knew those attacks were my brother's doing, just hearing about it. Everyone outside the boundaries of Oasis must be going crazy, trying to find me. And I wished Killian was too. I wished there was something I could hold on to until all of this was over. But there was nothing. My mate was dead. And I was mated to the responsible for his death, sleeping with him and living a life that was a complete lie. Trust me, I had no choice. I didn't remember much after I saw Nikolai murder Killian and held my mate's lifeless body in my arms. I had no idea what happened to me. I had lost control. The last thing I remembered was a portal and being dragged into it. By the time I woke up, it was a few days later. I was here in Oasis, on Vladimir's bed. I had been marked by him and had been imprinted with the pyramid symbol, stripping me of my magic. I didn't know what they had done to me, but Vladimir wasn't expecting me to remember anything I shouldn't. He had erased everything that could have reminded me, including Adi. She had been binded, no doubt by Vladimir's dog, Nikolai. But I did remember, and Vladimir didn't like that. I was tortured, and Nikolai tried everything to manipulate my memories in a twisted way, making me believe what they all wanted. It had happened once when Lucius brainwashed me and made me forget everything. But not again. I would be a complete fool if it happened twice. Whatever, they did. I just couldn't forget. It was like my soul itself refused to, not with the rage and resentment rooted deep in my soul. The scar made by the sword that killed Killian helped me never to forget. It made me remember just who I had to make pay for his death. I was left with no choice but to surrender. Though Vladimir didn't believe it right away. He had constantly tested me in different ways, and with this stupid mate bond, he could feel everything I was feeling. I had to lock it all away, while I figured out how to avenge Killian's death, and escape this place. Only I couldn't. Oasis was more than just a place guarded by magic. It was a prison for every magical kind. This was how he created his army. Prisoners were tortured and forced like slaves to pledge allegiance to Vladimir and his cause. I had seen it happen countless times already. Oasis wasn't a place one could easily escape. Its boundaries were guarded and kept in place by Nikolai. With my time here, I realized he was harnessing the magic of every witch in Oasis. He was the worst kind of witch I had ever encountered, and once I had accomplished my aim, he would be the first I'd kill, in the most excruciating way. I pulled out of the water, tying a rope around my body. I had sent Sybil and Callie on an errand. Vladimir had placed them by my side to monitor me when he couldn't. But today, I had to take advantage of the fact that he wasn't around. I spelled myself, breaking the connection between Vladimir and me only for a few hours. I sauntered to my chamber, getting dressed as quickly as I could. I was running out of time already. Nikolai had begun to suspect me, I could feel it from everything that had been happening, starting from the last meeting I had with the Dark Circle. That was another of Vladimir's tests. It killed me when I found out the West regions had been conquered by the Dark Circle army. It only meant Vladimir was a step closer to his ultimate plan, and that the war with the North regions was closer than I thought. I knew there was no way Vladimir would attack North Central, at least not when the South regions hadn't been conquered by the Dark Circle armies. He was testing me and I had to play my part. I locked the door to my chamber using my magic. I hurried to the wall beside my bed. I muttered a few chants and a small drawer appeared. There were some things I had to keep safe and couldn't let get into Vladimir's hands. At first, all I wanted was to escape this hellhole after getting rid of Nikolai and Vladimir, but that changed when the dreams started. I pulled open the drawer, pulling out some items and my journal. Initially, I didn't understand what the dreams meant, but I knew better than to consider them mere dreams. Never would I make such a mistake again. It took me a while to realize my dreams of Vladimir were visions of what was about to happen. If only I had taken them more seriously, Killian would still be alive. Every one of my dreams was the same. It took me a while to understand what they meant. And the council was right. Vladimir and the Dark Circle were planning something evil, and it endangered the entire magical realm. Vladimir took me to the Dark Cave a few weeks after I had settled into my new life. He didn't have to say it, but I knew he needed my help. He told me of his plans and it was exactly what I had dreamt of. The end of every magical being who wouldn't pledge allegiance to him. That crazy imbecile was about to unleash a darkness that would destroy us all. The Shota magic. That was why the Dark Circle needed all 4 of the Phoenix Stones and they needed my magic to unleash it. I was given back access to my magic, but the pyramid symbol on my wrist was restricting my magic, so I had to get rid of it. I was surprised it worked, but I had my mother's blood flowing in my veins, and she was right. I had to stop limiting myself. I created a spell that lifted the effect of the pyramid magic on me without them knowing. And I undid the spell binding 80, setting her free within the walls of my mind. I had tried to send a message to Morgan and my brothers to warn them of Vladimir's plan, but I couldn't. Nothing, not even a message, could get out of Oasis without Nikolai and Vladimir's knowledge. So instead, I had to do everything I could to stop Nikolai's attempt to unleash the darkness in a vessel. We've been at it for weeks, but nothing was working, since I rewrote the spells for the ritual. That way, Vladimir would never get what he wanted, and I could protect the lives of innocent witches that were being sacrificed as vessels. Instead of ending up dead, I stopped their hearts for a few hours, giving enough time to Jaskier and some witches I had befriended from the coven to save them. But I knew it was only a matter of time before Nikolai found out what was going on, and before that happened, I had to stop this darkness from unleashing and put an end to Vladimir.